Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, October 4th, 2019. Time for yet another show. In breaking news, you will all be shocked to know that a viral video that came out of an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez town hall in which an audience member wearing a t-shirt that appears to say, "Save the planet, eat the children," and who was advocating the eating of babies in order to save the planet, was actually staged by a pro-Trump group. This according to news from Gizmodo.com. And Matt Novak needs you to know that this is the case. Well, I think we've all kind of figured this out, but here's the interesting twist. Would you like to know who it was? This is interesting. I wouldn't have guessed it was these guys. LaRouche PAC. Well, okay, I guess they're still alive and doing things, and I don't think Lyndon LaRouche is, but, well, I think that's pretty interesting. Okay, I think they probably fooled no one with that one, but LaRouches are not necessarily specialists in pulling the wool over anyone's eyes. So I think we've got that one squared away. I hadn't heard anything about it. I just happened to see it go by on Twitter and figured, well, you know, that's something to discuss at the opening of the show. Everyone's got to have their finger on the pulse of that story. Daily Co's Radio is live now, as we've kicked off with the most important story in the world, obviously. Bill in Portland, Maine has sent us a transcript of his texts with, I don't know which oligarch it was that he was texting back and forth with this one. And let's see, here's the transcript, the actual official word-for-word transcript, unless it's not one. He says, do listeners really have to lend you their ears in exchange for hearing your show? My answer, allegedly, and I dispute this, is no quid pro quo. Maybe we should stop texting. Call me. To which Bill answers, you are so busted, and I say I hope a moat alligator eats you. And I really do. At this point, I think everybody deserves that. I don't know, am I supposed to pronounce that as moot or as moat, but spell it as moot? I don't know. I'm not certain what I'm supposed to be doing and what my role in all of this is. Good morning. It's Friday. We'll try and catch up on a couple of stories. It's impossible to read what is in my pocket for you here at this point. But we'll try and run through some of the headlines and catch up on things the best we can. There are stories that literally are happening that are swirling around Ukraine that I still don't know what's going on in them. We might have to read them on the air just for me to figure out what's happening. It occurred to me this morning, and I shared it on Twitter earlier this morning, like about 5 minutes earlier than this, that at the heart of all of this, they're still sticking at the White House with the story that, and I think Trump tweeted it this morning, that it is his obligation as president to point out corruption when he sees it. And their spin on things is that, look, in all likelihood, Hunter Biden didn't know that much about oil and gas. And Trump's telling he knows nothing about oil and gas. But what do you really need to know? This is stuff that we sell for a lot of money. How much can we sell it for? And then how much of that money can we keep? That's essentially all the members of the board probably need to know about these things. But at any rate, he was getting paid $50,000 a month, which is great if you can get it. I mean, I'd like to have $50,000 a month. I don't. But it occurs to me that, I mean, in the world of Donald Trump, in the world of corrupt oligarchs in the former Soviet Union, $50,000 a month, if you get it every month, is $600,000 a year, which would be awesome. I'd love to have it. It would make all my dreams come true, except for the dream I have about making $700,000 a year. But it would get me much closer to that, for instance. It would, but it doesn't put you, first of all, I don't think it puts you in the 1% these days anymore. Haven't we all read all of the stories in the New York Times about people struggling to make ends meet on $500,000 a year. Well, admittedly, this is an extra $100K, and that's always nice, but it's not exactly, ivory back scratcher territory necessarily. It would be fantastic to have, but in the oligarch's world and Donald Trump's world, $600,000 doesn't pay for 9 holes of golf with Donald Trump. And it's the amount of money, for instance, that, or almost the amount of money that Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman gave away to Republican super PACs and Republican candidates in the last year or so. So it's not, in the grand scheme of things, that much money. It's a fantastic salary to make, and it's not his only salary, too. I mean, Hunter Biden, I guess, was doing pretty well for himself. But the idea that as President of the United States, you have this obligation to root out corruption in Ukraine. And remember what it is Trump believes about Ukraine. He thinks it's hopelessly corrupt, that oligarchs there are stealing millions hand over fist, and billions of dollars are being pumped out of the country and spirited away to offshore bank accounts, et cetera, et cetera. Are you telling me that the top priority of the President of the United States in fixing one of the most corrupt countries in the world, as he would have you believe, starts at the $50,000 level? That, you know something, President Zelensky, I understand corruption in your country is so bad, billions of dollars are disappearing left and right. And guess what I found? I found a guy who made $50,000 out of that every month to come to meetings about which he knows nothing. I mean, I couldn't even tell you what would be my guess. How many American executives, so-called executives, do you think are making $50,000 a month or would accept $50,000 a month to serve on the boards of the businesses that they know nothing about? Believe me, boards of directors all over the country are paying people twice that much to not know anything about the industry they're involved in and just show up and lend their name and cast the vote and tell shareholders it's all okay, don't worry about it, don't sue us for anything. Somebody sent me the claim in response to that I guess this person said that the average member of a board of a pharmaceutical company or an oil and gas company in this country is much more than that. It's about $700,000 or so for people on pharmaceutical company boards, even moderately sized pharmaceutical companies. Here it is. What do I have here? Paul Calamuzzo, who tweets as Cali, Kali 77, sends for a board member of a giant oil and gas company, it's what they pay. Fox pays an average of $2.5 million for its board members, and Sign Pharmaceuticals, I guess you get $700,000 for being on their board. He had to, I guess, fly to Ukraine for his stupid meetings to cash his $50,000 check. Don't get me wrong, it's nice to have the money, and it would be influential with me, I assume, or at least I would have a hard time pretending it wasn't influential. But that's going on all over the place. And of course, I mean, that's just setting aside the idea that Donald Trump is the one who says this. He's not taking bribes less than $1 million. And he makes more than that every time somebody decides to stay over at one of the Trump hotels, rent all the rooms on a floor, and then not even bother to show up. I'm really curious to see whether anybody ever finds out about an arranged bribe like that through the hotels, where somebody actually says, I'd like to book a whole floor of rooms, and just says, and we're not going to show up. So by the way, if you wanted to double book those rooms and double dip on them, that would be fine. You can go right ahead and do that. And, have no worries about it. This is supposed to be a bribe. I'm wondering whether they'll turn one of those up yet. Okay. Well, speaking of that stupid story that I brought you right at the beginning from Gizmodo about the let's eat babies to save the planet thing, I see that somebody has found Don Jr. being stupid enough to believe that this is the case. Nick Dyer here, who he says he's director of news and stand-up at Comedy Central, says, I cannot say this enough. Don Jr.'s appetite for owning himself is absolutely insatiable. So guess what he did? Of course, here he is tweeting, seems like a normal AOC supporter to me, and he's including the report of some other, one of the right-wing idiot so-called journalists reporting on this. Who's this? Ryan Saavedra. So one of Ocasio-Cortez's constituents loses her mind over climate change during AOC's town hall, claims we only have a few months left. We've got to start eating babies. We don't have enough time. We have to get rid of those babies. We need to eat the babies. And they bought it, and they're very dumb people. I don't know what to tell you. But I guess that's apparently true, that Don Jr., I don't know. I guess there's room for him there to say, hey, I knew it was a joke. I was just kidding and ribbing AOC about this stuff. All right. Well, we'll see, and we'll see whether anybody believes that. Shoo! What a day, huh? All right, moving on. I guess I got to bookmark this Gizmodo thing so that I can share it with all the rest of you later. And, wow, what a day. All right, there's real news out there. I'm sure of it. We'll see if we can't figure out what is the most efficient use of our time and then not do it. I think we're pretty good at that, and I think we can get that done. Let's see. I guess the big news of the morning, I'm told by, who was it on Twitter, who basically said that the must-read of the morning if you're just waking up. Here we are. Yamiche Alcindor. So the PBS NewsHour White House correspondent, who says, in no uncertain terms, if you're just waking up, and this was an hour ago, so if you're just waking up an hour ago, congratulations to you. You might not be interested in that $500 or $50,000 a month gig I have for you over here. If you're just waking up, you've got 25 pages of must reading to do. Oh, well, that'll take a while. House Democrats released a number of texts provided by Kurt Volker, the former U.S. envoy to Ukraine. And it's all written up here in a gigantic, 25-page press release from the Foreign Affairs Committee of the House. For a shortcut, Yamiche says, key exchange between Bill Taylor, the top U.S. diplomat in Ukraine, and Gordon Sondland, the U.S. ambassador to the EU. Taylor says it's, quote, crazy to withhold security assistance to Ukraine for help with a political campaign. It is. Well, it's impeachable and crazy. Sondland says, you are incorrect about President Trump's intentions. You see, that's the problem with it. Bill Taylor asks a question at the heart of the Democrats' impeachment inquiry. Are we now saying that security assistance and a White House meeting for Zelensky are conditioned on investigations? At which point, Gordon Sondland replies, call me, i.e., let's take this off of the paper trail and discuss this voice only and stop doing crimes right here in writing. I'm somewhat interested in seeing what else lies at the heart of this, but I don't know if 25 pages is worth wading through. But it's accompanied by a cover letter from the leadership of the Democratic leadership on the House side of the members of the Intelligence, Oversight and Reform, and Foreign Affairs committees, who I guess heard from Volker the other day. Was it yesterday? And they write a Dear Colleagues letter to cover the circulation of this report. And it begins, as you might guess, Dear Colleagues, we are writing to convey our grave concerns with the unprecedented actions of President Donald Trump and his administration with respect to the House of Representatives impeachment inquiry. Oh, yes. The new White House position, allegedly, and I don't believe this is actually their position. This is just something they're saying to buy time. Their new position is that they don't have to comply with any of the subpoenas unless there is a formal, full House floor vote declaring that we are having an impeachment inquiry. This is, of course, not necessary and should be non-justiciable because it's up to the House to tell people what footing the House is on. But it shouldn't be believed anyway. And quite honestly, I mean, it might it might be wise to respond to this simply by having that vote because you'll win that vote. And okay, now we're on an official impeachment inquiry footing. But in doing so, you will only prompt the White House to say that's invalid too. And yeah, there was a formal vote, but I forgot to tell you, we only recognize it if you were standing on one foot when you cast the vote. That's what we mean by footing, you see. And then if Nancy Pelosi were to say, fine, I'll do it again. It doesn't matter. We have the votes. I know. I can do it instantly. We're all going to stand on one foot and vote that we're an impeachment inquiry. And it will carry. At which point the White House will say, but you weren't standing on your left foot. That's the key thing. And, you know, it's going to be like, go around this way. And we'll probably end up voting on our left foot just to show how reasonable we are. Look how reasonable I am. The whole place is standing on one foot, and I am panning around the room with the camera to prove that that's the case. And they'll pass it, and they say, you're supposed to have your fingers crossed and one finger up your nose. And it's going to go on forever and ever. So I'm not sure how to deal with it. They might just as well say, screw you, you don't get to say whether we're in an impeachment hearing or not. Yeah, and I guess then the problem becomes, does a Trump or Trump sympathetic judge say, despite the fact that most other people would say it's not justiciable, I'm going to justiciabilize it and say, yeah, you got to have a formal vote. And, you know, how long will they entertain this nonsense? That's a big question. Anyway, so here's the Dear Colleagues letter saying, as you know, we're having this impeachment inquiry. The president and his aides are engaging in a campaign of misinformation and misdirection in an attempt to normalize the act of soliciting foreign powers to interfere in our elections. And we all saw him do it live on television yesterday, soliciting more of the same from Ukraine and additional help from China. Because the Chinese, you know, they know everything about the truth about corruption in America. Anyway, we've now all seen the summary of the call in which President Trump repeatedly urged the Ukrainian president to launch an investigation into former Vice President Joe Biden, immediately after the Ukrainian president mentioned critical U.S. military assistance to counter Russian aggression. Don't lose sight of the fact that that's what's at the heart of this here. Russia is at the heart of this. The president claims he did nothing wrong. Even more astonishingly, I would have said astonishingly, but even more astonishing, he is now openly and publicly asking another foreign power, China, to launch its own sham investigation into the Bidens, or against the Bidens, to further his own political aims. This is not normal or acceptable. And neither, by the way, is two spaces after a period, but they're doing that nonetheless. It's driving me crazy as I read it to you. It is unethical, unpatriotic, and wrong, as is the quid pro quo thing. I'm just talking about the punctuation. American presidents should never press foreign powers to target their domestic political rivals. Engaging in these stunning abuses in broad daylight does not absolve President Trump of his wrongdoings or his grave offenses against the Constitution. Over the past week, new reports have revealed that other Trump administration officials also may have been involved in the illicit effort to get Ukrainian help for the president's campaign. For example, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has now admitted that he was on the call when President Trump explicitly pressed the Ukrainian president to investigate the Bidens, but failed to report this to the FBI or other law enforcement authorities, or to admit it when he was directly asked. Or rather, he wasn't directly asked. He was asked what knowledge, I guess, he had of the situation, and he pretended to have none. You will recall FBI Director Christopher Wray urged individuals to report efforts to seek or receive help from a foreign power that may intervene in a U.S. presidential election. I had forgotten that, but now I will recall it. Thank you. This obligation is not diminished when the instigator of that foreign intervention is the President of the United States. It is all the more critical to the security of our elections. Instead, when asked by the media about his knowledge or participation in the call, Secretary Pompeo dissembled. Likewise, we are investigating reports that Vice President Mike Pence may have been made aware of the contents of the call, and his absence from the Ukrainian president's inauguration may have been related to efforts to put additional pressure on Ukraine to deliver on the president's demands. This week, current and former State Department officials have begun cooperating with the impeachment inquiry by producing documents and scheduling interviews and depositions. Based on the first production of materials, it has become immediately apparent why Secretary Pompeo tried to block these officials from providing information. Yes, an undiscussed story so far has been that Pompeo apparently was exploring his options for punishing, firing, or otherwise bringing the House down on State Department employees who would defy what he hoped would be his order not to comply with any investigatory requests from the House of Representatives, which is a pretty amazing thing to do. The committees have now obtained text messages from Ambassador Kurt Volker, the former special representative for Ukraine negotiations, communicating with other officials, including William B. Bill Taylor, the French phrase which we use here, chargé d'affaires. We're going to use the Frenchification on that. The chargé d'affaires at the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine, Gordon Sondland, the U.S. Ambassador to the European Union, Andrei Yermak, new name in this for me, aide to Ukrainian President Zelensky. Maybe we read his name out loud before. And the president's agent, that's an interesting way of putting it, Rudy Giuliani, and others. It's hard to say the word lawyer with him, isn't it? These text messages reflect serious concerns raised by a State Department official about the detrimental effects of withholding critical military assistance from Ukraine and the importance of setting up a meeting between President Trump and the Ukrainian president without further delay. He has also directly expressed concerns that this critical military assistance and the meeting between the two presidents were being withheld in order to place additional pressure on Ukraine to deliver on the president's demand for Ukraine to launch politically motivated investigations. Earlier today, selected portions of these texts were leaked to the press out of context. In order to help correct the public record, we're now providing an attachment with more complete excerpts of the exchanges. The following are the additional excerpts we are providing are still only a subset of the full body of the materials, which we hope to make public after a review for personally identifiable information. Our investigation will continue in the coming days, but we hope every member of the House will join us in condemning in the strongest terms the President's now open defiance of our core values as American citizens to guard against foreign interference in our democratic process. Signed here, and it's signed very sincerely, by the way. It just says sincerely, but I can feel that there's some very involved in this, including the use of what appears to be a rubber stamp signature for Adam Schiff, chairman of the Intelligence Committee, signed otherwise by Elijah Cummings, chair of House Oversight and Reform Committee, and Elliot Engel, chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Following, though, is the attachment of many, many pages of these texts, some of which are printed sideways in landscape here. And they're not full pages, so you could probably read all the way through them, but I guess I thought I'd give you a sense of what the members were saying to their colleagues. But I guess the best nuggets out of this thing are the ones that Yamiche selected earlier, and basically Gordon Sondland saying in these text messages, are you serious? Are we really going to withhold military aid to Ukraine unless they help out with Trump's re-election campaign? And the nearest anybody can come to saying, no, that's wrong, is, well, you misunderstand the president. Call me and I'll tell you what they are, but no more writing about these things. So this should be an interesting day as people begin to digest those things, and we'll see whether any other great, spectacular greatest hits are pulled out of that thread. Phew. Anyway, let's see. Speaking of Ukraine's investigation, I did see some people despairing this morning over a New York Times headline, which indeed reads, Ukraine to review criminal case of firm linked to Biden's son. So it appears they will be going forward with some sort of investigation, though I recall reading the other day in an article we've probably archived at this point that we were warned that investigation might in fact be restarted, but that it wasn't necessarily going to be conducted in a way that was beneficial to Trump, or it wasn't going to come out like he thought it might. Let's see if I can find that one. We'll have that standing by and see if we can remind ourselves why it was that we thought it wasn't going to come out that way. I don't see it right off the bat, but I might have to open up a few things that aren't immediately obvious. There's a dog next door, I guess, you might be able to hear in the background, who thinks he knows where this article might be. But I guess we'll come back to that and look for it. This morning's article, the thing that's dismaying people this morning, Ukraine to review criminal case of firm linked to Biden's son, written by Andrew Kramer and updated as of just before showtime here, datelined in Kiev, but our break is coming up. Let's see if we can get a gist of things before we head out on break. Ukraine's top prosecutor said on Friday, the new one, that he would review several important cases previously handled by his predecessors, including a criminal case involving the owner, not Biden himself, but the owner of a natural gas company that employed a son of former Vice President Joseph R. Biden Jr., in case you forgot which one we were talking about. The development came amid an impeachment inquiry against President Trump connected to a request he made to the Ukrainian president asking him to investigate Mr. Biden. You know about that. It raised questions about whether the Ukraine was, in effect, bowing to public and private pressure from the President of the United States, on which it has depended for millions of dollars in aid. The Prosecutor General, Ruslan Ryaboshkova. We're going to work on that pronunciation after this. So this is the new guy that came in with Zelensky. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Still not seeing my this won't go the way you think it was supposed to go article. I might have to actually look back at one of our old summaries and try and find that thing. It might work better. But that's just one of the hinky functionings of Pocket these days, I think. Anyway, I didn't get any further on that pronunciation. The new prosecutor general, who I guess replaces Shokin, and was it, I can't remember what the next guy's name was. But anyway, we are 2 prosecutors down the road, I think, from Shokin at this point. Ruslan Ryaboshkova, or Ryaboshkapa. I'm not certain where the emphasis goes on that one. Anyway, he took office in August, and he says now he said he intended to review 15 cases in all, including high-profile investigations of wealthy Ukrainians, among them the owner of the natural gas company Burisma Holdings, where Mr. Biden's son Hunter served on the board until earlier this year. The prosecutor did not say how long his audit would last. Oh, maybe it'll be like Trump's tax audits. His review is needed before a decision on any further action could be taken. In initiating the audit, Mr. Ryaboshkapa, it's R-Y-A-B-O, Ryaboshkapa, S-H-A-P-K-A, Shapka. Ryaboshapka. Ryaboshabka. We'll work on that one. Anyway, Mr. Prosecutor here said in a news conference in Kiev, the key words were not Biden and not Burisma. Okay, so that's something. The key was those proceedings which were closed or investigated by the previous leadership, he said, but added, in this large number of cases, there may be ones with these two words. Okay, that could happen. Ukrainian officials have for months been threading a needle in discussing the case related to the older Mr. Biden, a leading contender in next year's presidential election, in case you hadn't been awake for the last year or so. They have tried to signal the president and his allies that the issues will be investigated, even as they tried to telegraph to Democrats that they were not bending to Mr. Trump's pressure. At the news briefing, our new prosecutor general here said he had not received any phone calls about the cases or come under any undue pressure on other matters. No foreign or domestic politicians, officials, or people who are not officials called me and tried to influence my decisions on specific criminal proceedings, he said. They did all of that with the president instead. He added, the prosecution service is beyond politics. We are conducting an audit of all cases, including those which were investigated by previous leadership of the prosecutor's office. If laws were violated, we will react accordingly. Asked if he had any evidence of wrongdoing by Hunter Biden, he told reporters, I have no such information. So there's the answer to that one. Mr. Trump's repeated public requests that the Ukrainian government investigate a case touching on a likely opponent in next year's election, what he described in a phone call with President Zelensky of Ukraine in July as a favor, is central to the formal House committee impeachment inquiry called by Speaker Nancy Pelosi. The inquiry is examining whether Trump betrayed his oath of office and the nation's security by seeking to enlist the aid of a foreign power to tarnish a political rival. Mr. Trump has vigorously, he denies it, and he does so with a lot of spittle, but he doesn't do anything vigorously, really. Vigorously denied doing anything wrong, calling his phone call with Mr. Zelensky perfect, repeatedly. On the call, Mr. Zelensky suggested that he would assist with an investigation of Burisma. According to the White House notes of the phone call, the Ukrainian president said that a new prosecutor general would soon be appointed, who would be 100% my person and would look into the situation. The Ukrainian president said his country was also almost ready to purchase anti-tank missiles made by Raytheon Company. This actually becomes important in some other articles later on, I think, to be used to better repel armored assaults by Russian-supported fighters. Mr. Trump responded, I'd like you to do us a favor, though. And I didn't add any words in that. Allies of Mr. Trump said that a reconstructed transcript of the call shows no quid pro quo, making the impeachment inquiry baseless. But Democrats said that Mr. Trump's request for a favor and the fact that he had already withheld millions in aid from Ukraine before the call raised serious questions that must be examined. Our new prosecutor general's comments on Friday were the first indication of how Ukrainian criminal justice officials were handling one of the two investigations that Mr. Trump raised in the call. No evidence of wrongdoing by Mr. Biden or his son has emerged, and the elder Mr. Biden has denied the accusations. But Mr. Trump has doubled down, urging China to investigate the Bidens and charging that the country lavished $1.5 billion on Hunter Biden, now that's real money, in order to influence his father and win favorable trade deals with the United States. On Thursday, the State Department gave initial approval to the $39.2 million sale of 150 Javelin missiles and related equipment to Ukraine. The sale of the Javelins to Ukraine must still go through Congress. Ukraine has been fighting Russia for 5 years in eastern Ukraine since Moscow's seizure of Crimea. Pausing here to say, one, the $1.5 billion lavishing that Hunter Biden is accused of receiving here is, I think, even under Trump's telling of the story, I believe it's supposed to be the capitalization of an investment fund. It wasn't a $1.5 million gift to Hunter Biden. And I'm not even certain that it happened, much less that it happened the way he says it did. Two, the fact that Raytheon makes Javelin missiles is of some interest, given that I guess Ken Volker, or Kurt Volker, why do I want to keep saying Ken? Is there a Ken Volker? out there or something similar. Anyway, Kurt Volker apparently had a very unusual arrangement, I think, with the State Department. While he was a working official with the State Department, he had some sort of arrangement whereby he was a part-timer. And that allowed him to keep working part-time for a lobbying and law firm, I think a law firm, but a public relations and lobbying firm perhaps. Anyway, two of the clients, it just so happens, of this firm, though he apparently, did the whole firewall recusal thing, which is sometimes questionable in some places. But apparently two of the big clients of this outfit were Ukraine and Raytheon, which is kind of weird. But, firewall, recusal, yada, yada. We'll see whether that holds up. Anyway, our new prosecutor general over in Ukraine, we find out this guy once worked for the clean government group Transparency International. That sounds good. He'll steer the Ukrainian prosecutor's office handling the issues raised by Trump in a phone call with the Ukrainian president. His announcement that the case was now bogged down in an internal audit of unclear duration in the prosecutor general's office muddies any clear signal to either side in the American political debate, which is probably what they wanted out of this. Is there any more new information here? Well, one, reminding us that the previous prosecutor general's name was Yuri Lutsenko. He met several times with Giuliani about all of this. And before Lutsenko, that's where Shokin came in. There's also another name in the mix here, Lutsenko's subordinate in the prosecutor's office, Konstantin Kulyk, Kulyk, identified the owner of Burisma as the suspect in the criminal proceedings that will be re-examined. Okay, so we're up to speed on that. We might need to turn just at least momentarily over to the actual front page of Daily Kos in the last 12 hours or so to make sure that we've got everything, leaning on Hunter's impeachment news roundup from late yesterday evening. His headline here, impeachment news roundup, Volker testifies while Trump repeats his call for foreign election help. I think if that's all there is in here, we'll take a look at the bullet points. I think we got those two. Donald Trump roiled the impeachment waters yesterday, by again making the suggestion, this time in public, that both Ukraine and China launch an investigation into the Bidens. We know about there being no credible evidence of wrongdoing by the Bidens in either case. Let's see. So our bullet points here are: former envoy to Ukraine Kurt Volker testified before members of 3 House committees. We see the result of that in the Dear Colleague letter. Volker reportedly testified that he had warned Trump personal lawyer / agent Rudy Giuliani that the stories Giuliani was pursuing on Joe and Hunter Biden were a lie and that Giuliani's sources were untrustworthy, but that Giuliani ignored his warnings. And there are some links here to other stories we might need to read to fill out the record here. A mysterious packet of propaganda delivered yesterday, that would have been Tuesday, or Wednesday, I guess, to Congress by the State Department Inspector General appears to be in part a Giuliani-written collection of conspiracy theories intended to smear former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch. Yovanovitch was recalled after a campaign for her ouster by Trump allies, including Giuliani. In another blockbuster revelation, the Wall Street Journal reports yesterday evening that Trump ordered Yovanovitch's removal because Giuliani saw her as, quote, an obstacle to efforts to push Ukraine to investigate Mr. Biden and his son. Ta-da! Donald Trump claimed yesterday that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell had told him his Ukraine call was, quote, the most innocent phone call ever. Mr. McConnell's office so far has neither confirmed nor denied Trump's claim, which means it's denying it. Questions as to whether the White House released readout of Trump's call with Ukrainian President Zelensky are a word-for-word transcript, as Trump insists, or was instead edited to omit certain parts of that conversation, still swirling. And House Republican Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, among the most insistent of Trump's House defenders, wrote Speaker Pelosi to demand impeachment be put on hold until a laundry list of Republican demands were met. No, that's not going to happen. And Pelosi dispensed with that demand in short order. Skipping up into today's or this morning's recaps here, I think we've got Mark Sumner up near the top of the page at the moment, and Laura Clausen with the latest. Mark treated the text messages and see if there's anything worth extracting here that we haven't hit on before. And I see that there's at least one other story touching on this, not on the Daily Kos front page, but circulating on Twitter. Let's see. We've got here, as former special envoy to Ukraine, Kurt Volker was being deposed behind closed doors on Thursday. Rudy Kaludi chose that moment to release a series of text messages himself, which seemed to imply that Volker had been directing his actions in Ukraine and that everything they had done was conducted with the full and enthusiastic support of the Ukrainian government. That impression was bolstered by Republicans like Jim Jordan, who emerged from the session with Volker claiming that nothing the part-time State Department official, full-time arms lobbyist, had said supported the need for an impeachment inquiry. And that's what Laura is writing about this morning. But both Giuliani's tweets and Jordan's statements hugely misrepresented the actual content of the meeting and the actual context of the released messages. So, on Thursday evening, the chairs of the three committees, as I told you, put out their Dear Colleague statement along with a collection of those text messages. Let's see. Where can we begin with this? What those messages said is that it's not surprising that Ukrainian President Zelensky mentioned Giuliani during his conversation with Trump, and it's certainly not surprising that Zelensky seemed unfazed by the request that he look into Biden, because Trump's team had been hounding Zelensky to launch investigations into Biden's non-existent crimes and into the mythical relationship between Ukraine and the events in the 2016 election. And those officials made it very, very clear that Ukraine was getting nothing until Zelensky made a public announcement that he was doing what Trump wanted. And now that announcement's been made. On July 19th, 6 days before Trump's phone call, Volker exchanged a series of texts with Trump's ambassador to the European Union, that's Sondland. And it's clear that well before that point, everyone involved knew that nothing was going to happen until Zelensky gave him what he wanted. Volker's text here includes, most important is for Zelensky to say he will help investigation and address any specific personal issues if there are any. That doesn't sound very good. On July 19th, Volker and Sondland were prepping for Trump to call Zelensky. Sondland telling Volker, looks like POTUS call tomorrow. I spoke directly to Zelensky and gave him a full briefing. He's got it. Volker says, good. Had breakfast with Rudy this morning, teeing up call with Yermak, that's the Zelensky aide, on Monday. Must have helped. Most important is for Zelensky to say he will help with the investigation and address any specific personal issues, if any. The call didn't happen that day, and 2 days later, an exchange between Sondland and Bill Taylor, that's the charge d'affaires, made it clear that Zelensky understood exactly what Trump was asking of him. Taylor says, President Zelensky is sensitive about Ukraine being taken seriously, not merely as an instrument in Washington, re-election politics, re-election politics. You see, both Zelensky and all members of the Trump team understood exactly what was happening. Trump was requiring Zelensky to proclaim an investigation into Biden and into the 2016 elections if he wanted so much as a phone call, much less assistance. And Zelensky knew that this meant he was being asked to involve himself in Trump's re-election bid. The next day, Giuliani spoke with Zelensky's aide and apparently came to an agreement. Volker reported that they could move ahead because Giuliani was going to tell Trump to make the call. But just to be sure, Volker also sent a text to Zelensky's aide just before the call from Trump, saying, heard from White House, assuming President Z convinces Trump he will investigate / get to the bottom of what happened in 2016, and that's in quotes, we will nail down date for visit to Washington. Good luck. Wow. On August 9th, 2 weeks after the call between Trump and Zelensky, Sondland lets Volker know Trump is impatient for Zelensky to announce the investigation. Sondland texting, I think POTUS really wants the deliverable. Have you got the goods? Do you have the package? He wants the deliverable. Volker says, but does Yermak know that? Sondland says, yep. Later in the same conversation, Sondland makes it clear that they don't just want Zelensky to announce an investigation. They want to stage manage the events as if the president of Ukraine is a bit player preparing to make a commercial. Sondland says, to avoid misunderstandings, it might be helpful to ask Audrey for a draft statement, embargoed, so that we can see exactly what they propose to cover. Even though Z does a live presser, they can still summarize in a brief statement. Later that same day, Volker carries forward on Sondland's suggestion by contacting Giuliani to make sure they have his approval on what Zelensky should say. Hi, Mr. Mayor. Had a good chat with Yermak last night. He was pleased with your phone call, mentioned Z making a statement. Can we all get on the phone to make sure I advise Z correctly as to what he should be saying? We want to make sure we get this done right. Thanks. Sondland adds in, good idea, Kurt. I am on Pacific time. Giuliani says, yes, you can call me now. The next day, Zelensky's aide, Andrei Yermak, I guess that's who we were talking about a minute ago. I wonder, Audrey. Is that a miss? Maybe he also has an Audrey working over there. But okay, let's see. So the next day, Zelensky's aide, Andrei Yermak, tries to make it clear that Zelensky will make an announcement, but only after it's clear Trump is going to meet with him. Yermak says, I think it's possible to make this declaration and mention all those things which we discussed yesterday, but it will be logical, to do after we receive a confirmation of a date. But after some back and forth, Volker makes it clear that Trump won't agree to a date until he's happy about the proposed statement. Let's iron out statement and then use that to get date, and then President Z can go forward with it. And Yermak finally agrees to give all of Trump's team what they've been wanting. Zelensky will make a statement that he's opening an investigation into Burisma, the company where Hunter Biden worked, and into all aspects of the 2016 election. Once we have a date, we will call for a press briefing announcing upcoming visit and outlining visit for reboot of U.S.-Ukraine relationship, including, among other things, Burisma and election meddling and investigations. On August 13th, Volker and Sondland have what may be the most sickly ironic exchange of the entire scheme, one in which they plan to disrupt the 2020 election by getting Ukraine to make claims about 2016. Volker provides his script for what Zelensky should say in the proposed press conference. This is two United States ambassadors putting words into the mouth of a foreign leader who ran on anti-corruption for the express purpose of getting him to declare a pair of investigations intended to help Trump in 2020. And it goes like this, Volker saying, special attention should be paid to interference in the political processes in the United States, especially with the alleged involvement of some Ukrainian politicians. I want to declare this is unacceptable. We intend to initiate and complete a transparent and unbiased investigation of all available facts and episodes, including those involving Burisma and the 2016 U.S. elections, which in turn will prevent the recurrence of this problem in the future. Sondland says, perfect. Over the next 2 weeks, Sondland and Volker continued to press Yermak to have Zelensky make this statement. For whatever reason, perhaps going back to the initial reason stated that Zelensky doesn't want to be Trump's instrument to re-election, the press conference is not announced. August 28th, Yermak forwards a press clipping showing that he's aware that Trump is withholding military aid. 2 days after that, Trump cancels his proposed visit with Zelensky. After this period of silence, Taylor contacts Sondland again on September 1st. At this point, it's 3 weeks after the whistleblower complaint has been filed. More importantly, 5 days since the Intelligence Community Inspector General has declared the report urgent, and Acting Director of National Intelligence Joseph McGuire has made the complaint available to the White House and DOJ. It's clear at this point that Sondland at least knows that the jig is up. Taylor texts, are we now saying that security assistance and White House meetings are conditioned on investigations? Sondland, call me. Taylor messages again a week later, expressing the fear from Ukrainian side that based on what they've already seen, Trump can't be trusted. Hello. Taylor says the nightmare is they give the interview and they don't get the security assistance. The Russians love it, and I quit. Amazing, because it kind of almost goes that way, doesn't it? The final recorded exchange happens on September 9th, after the existence of the whistleblower report is known to Congress and 3 House committees announce investigations. At this point, Sondland is ridiculously aware that every time he leaves a text, he is speaking into an open mic that history will hear. Meanwhile, Taylor is on the ground in Ukraine watching the Russians drive back forces in Donbass and witnessing the desperation of the government in Kiev. Taylor texts, "The message to Ukrainians and Russians we send with the decision on security assistance is key. With the hold, we have already shaken their faith in us. Thus, my nightmare scenario." Sondland does not reply. Taylor texts again, "Counting on you to be right about this." Sondland now answers, "Bill, I never said I was right. I said we are where we are and believe we have identified the best pathway forward. Let's hope it works." Taylor says, "As I said on the phone, I think it's crazy to withhold security assistance for help with a political campaign." Sondland replies, "Bill, I believe you are incorrect about President Trump's intentions. The president has been crystal clear, no quid pro quos of any kind." Except, he did. All he's doing is declaring that there weren't any, but there were, and we've all seen it. Sondland then suggests we stop going back and forth by text, and they do. The level of pressure being applied to Ukraine, the insistence that nothing happens without Trump getting his investigations into Biden in 2016, the utterly improper directions of the whole sequence by Trump's personal attorney, it's all there. So is the painful irony of Volcker writing a script for the purpose of interfering in the 2020 election that includes claims about not interfering in the election. And at the peak of the whole thing, William Taylor speaks for the nation when he expresses his horror at what is happening. As I said on the phone, I think it's crazy to withhold security assistance for help with a political campaign. And I think everybody else should think the same. I happened to see Tegan Goddard's Political Wire chatting about this too, directing people to NBC News' first read on this situation. Diplomats' text messages provide powerful evidence for impeachment. First read has this on it here. Chuck Todd, who is personally dismayed by all this, by the way, in case you didn't see. Mark Murray and Carrie Dan, 3 of them responsible for first read. It was always going to be difficult for Democrats to lay out their impeachment case against President Trump using his rhetoric alone, even when he's caught on camera asking Ukraine and China to help him against Joe Biden. Caught on camera makes it sound like it was a hidden camera. This was, of course, a helicopter briefing, which, the cameras are in full view and he's being asked questions by the press. But the text messages that House Democrats released Thursday night provide the potentially tangible evidence that the President of the United States was using the power of his office to extract re-election help from another country. Politico calls them the smoking texts, and it's hard to disagree. The exchange that received the most attention, of course, is the "I think it's crazy to withhold" text. U.S. Ambassador to the EU, Gordon Sondland, a major Trump donor, it's linked in here, says, well, you misunderstand the president's intentions. Note, though, that Sondland's reply came nearly 5 hours later. Now, parenthetically, they ask, did he get a tip that the correspondence by text was problematic? Even if you think that Sondland's reply provides a defense that there was no quid pro quo, it's important to see all of the text messages that came before that final exchange. Volker's text to Sondland on July 19th. We read it, of course, and that's the one that says, I had breakfast with Rudy this morning, teeing up the call with Yermak. This must have helped. It's most important for Zelensky to say he'll help with the investigation, et cetera, right? All of this. And expressions of Zelensky's sensitivity about Ukraine being taken seriously and not being seen as an instrument in Washington re-election politics. It's just about as bad as it can get. And the fact that there's also this several hours gap before Sondland says, let's stop doing this by text, is pretty suspect all by itself. All right. I think that's pretty much the key points of what's going on with the text messages that were released yesterday. And I think that brings us up to date with that. I guess maybe, well, I'll take a look during the short break here to find out whether it looks like things are developing in the investigation into the original provenance of all of the information that was in the state IG's packet and things that Rudy Giuliani has come up with. The press is pursuing things, I think, past Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman and bringing it all the way back to just Russian intelligence or the troll farms generating this material that was then maybe laundered through somebody in the Ukrainian government, maybe not, and then perhaps passed on to Parnas and Fruman and from them to Giuliani. But I guess that investigation still ongoing, although I don't know how much further you think you're going to be able to trace something back beyond an origin with Russian intelligence. I don't know if you're ever going to be able to, I mean, you might be able to put a name of an operative to it, but I don't know if that gets you anywhere. I mean, even if it ultimately were to say, all right, President Putin himself wrote this up, I don't know, that might be sensational, but I guess it doesn't really matter whether it was him or an underling that actually designed the thing. I guess if they can trace it all the way back to Russia, well, you know how that will go. I guess we'll both sides that. Others disagree that the Russians were involved. Chuck Todd was pretty clear in his disappointment, but, he never really delivers much. Same time, I think, was it Jonathan Karl reporting for ABC News last night that basically said, yeah, this sets up a big debate about whether or not the president's helicopter admission that he was asking China for help sets up a big debate about whether or not this is a wrong thing to do. Will we accept foreign election interference or not? We'll debate it after this. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. This is interesting. So I guess we've got maybe some leftover, what do you call them, technical glitches since our non-live shows where it went out without breaks, and we deprogrammed the breaks at the Netroots Radio headquarters, and I guess we haven't necessarily programmed them back again. And so instead of our regular breaks coming in for the live broadcast, my unmuted microphone stays live. Ordinarily, I don't have to mute my microphone during the breaks because my stream out to Netroots Radio is muted and the music plays. But I guess we haven't got the music back in place, or else maybe the stream isn't muted and I'm just heard over the music. So I apologize to everybody who has sent me the notes that I'm forgetting to mute the microphone during breaks, and hope our cold gets better. I don't actually have a cold. It's just, I guess, seasonal allergy, I guess, at this point. But ordinarily, that is automatically taken care of, and I can happily chat with Greg if he's there during the breaks, and that doesn't go out. But I guess we got to get that fixed up. So, project for you, Justice. We got to flip the switches on that. Okay. So let's see. I promised you before that short break that we would debate what Jonathan Karl set up, and here is the tweet from Jonathan last night saying, impeachment isn't so much about determining what the president did. He isn't denying the central allegation. This may boil down to a debate over whether it is proper for a president to ask a foreign government to investigate a political rival. So it may be such a debate. Of course, that will be a short debate, and I did promise we were going to have it after we got back. It goes like this. One side says, is it proper for a president to ask a foreign government to investigate a political rival? I maintain that it is. The other side will say, well, it isn't, and that's a fact, so thanks, we're done. And I don't know, these things, if they're not a judged debate, like you might find in a forensic society, then you just sit there and say, well, we'll just have to leave it there and let the voters decide. So, depending on what sort of forum we're in, We'll see how that debate comes out. Okay, let's see. Other things of importance, there are many. Let me go to this news. Let me grab the tweet that carried it forward. A CNN report. And the key point here brought forward by Keith Boykin, the CNN commentator. I don't know if it's his piece that he's talking about here. It is not, but Keith Boykin's key takeaway from the piece, that during a June 18th phone call with Chinese President Xi Jinping, or Xi Jinping, working on my pronunciation. I got to work on that some more. I've had some tips about that, but maybe over the semester break, my son who's away at college and taking Chinese can help me with that in a way that I can remember. Anyway, June 18th phone call with the president of China. Trump asked China to investigate Biden, but in the same call, he also told Xi he would remain quiet on Hong Kong protests as trade talks progressed. So the possibility, depending on how you look at it, of whether or not there is yet another quid pro quo situation going on, and this may be the deal here. It may be, I will sell out Hong Kong and Western-style freedom in exchange for your help with investigating Biden, and I might even throw you a bone in the trade negotiations coming up as well. Okay, that doesn't look super good either. But let's see, is there more detail here in the CNN piece? Trump raised Biden with Xi in June. And the call is, of course, like others, housed in this highly secure server. So that's always fun to find out. Is there any way to collapse or get rid of this gigantic banner ad? There we go. I got to scroll and stay scrolled. Kylie Atwood, Kevin Liptak, Pamela Brown, Jim Sciutto, another pop-up, and Gloria Borger on the byline for CNN here with this one. When President Donald Trump suggested without prompting that China should investigate Joe Biden and his son, he thrust another political grudge into what was already the world's most complicated and consequential relationship. The move startled Chinese officials, who say they have little interest in becoming embroiled in a U.S. political controversy, and it amounted to the latest extraordinary effort by Trump to openly request political assistance from foreign governments. Thursday's comments weren't the first time Trump has injected Biden into his relationship with China, though he said Thursday he has never pushed Xi to investigate the former vice president, nor is it the first time he has sought to trade favors with Xi, who this week celebrated the 70th birthday of his communist state with a note of congratulations to Trump. During a phone call with Xi on June 18th, Trump raised Biden's political prospects as well as those of Senator Elizabeth Warren, who by then had started rising in the polls, according to two people familiar with the discussion. In that call, Trump also told Xi he would remain quiet on Hong Kong as trade talks progressed. The White House record of that call was later stored in that highly secured electronic system used to house a now infamous phone call with Ukraine's president, and which helped spark a whistleblower complaint that's led Democrats to open an impeachment inquiry. Asked earlier this week about Trump's call with Xi, the White House did not deny that he raised Biden. World leaders need to be able to speak freely in their conversations with the president. That is a key component to effective diplomacy. And that is why such conversations are kept confidential. That's Stephanie Grisham, the rarely seen White House press secretary, on that. We're not going to start discussing the contents of every conversation President Trump has with world leaders, other than to say his conversations are always appropriate, which means they're not. After this story published, Warren reacted to the news of Trump's call with Xi, writing on Twitter, "Trump can say what he wants about me, but it's outrageous that any president would sell out the people of Hong Kong behind closed doors. The public must see the transcript of Trump's call with Xi, and we need a leader who will stand up for our values." On Thursday, Trump told reporters at the White House he'd consider asking his counterpart in Beijing to investigate the Bidens. Let's see, skip down a little bit here. Trump's comments sparked confusion and a scramble for explanation from Chinese officials. Are you asking about the comments that Trump just made? I don't think I can tell you anything in this regard right now, said one Chinese diplomat when they questioned him on Thursday about Trump's remarks. This is quite chaotic, the diplomat said. We do not want to get in the middle of U.S. politics. One Trump ally outside the White House described receiving a message from Chinese government officials asking if Trump was serious when he suggested China open an investigation into Biden. The response, investigating corruption is an easy way to earn goodwill with Trump. That's a spin. The Chinese didn't immediately clarify if they would be launching an investigation or if they would make it public if they do. There are, of course, looming trade talks, as they note here, as trade negotiators prepare for another round of talks and as Xi contends with domestic challenges like Hong Kong. The Biden matter throws another wrench into tangled but high-stakes diplomacy. Trump's reluctance over the summer to speak out against a crackdown against pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong, and that's a little complicated in itself, has frustrated officials at the National Security Council and State Department, who have been advocating a firmer stance by the U.S., while Trump did eventually tweet out a call for Xi to find a, quote, humane solution to the Hong Kong unrest. Gee, thanks. Couldn't that be a minimum? He did not issue a forceful call to uphold human rights in the former British colony. And as protests again erupted this week, as massive celebrations were underway in Beijing for the 70th anniversary of the People's Republic of China, Trump went ahead and congratulated Xi as well. Congratulations to President Xi and the Chinese people on the 70th anniversary of their People's Republic of China. The People's Republic. Trump adopting, I guess, really they should have said, a drastically different tone than his Republican allies who use words like ghoulish, authoritarian, and horrors to mark the occasion. Trump's remarks Thursday have caused consternation among some of his aides, who have privately pined for an end to the trade war that is starting to take a toll on the U.S. economy. Only minutes before suggesting China investigate Biden, Trump implied he held the upper hand with China in trade talks, which are set to pick up next week when China's chief negotiator comes to Washington. I have a lot of options with China, Trump said, but if they don't do what we want, we have tremendous power. Already, some of the president's trade advisors say they believe China is watching the Democratic primary closely, making calculations on whether to agree to a new deal with Trump based on the prospects of various candidates. On several occasions, Trump has intimated that the Bidens have received millions of dollars from China, implying they capitalized on the then vice president's political power and connections. The allegations stem partly from an official trip both Bidens took to China in 2013, meant as a diplomatic mission to help ease tensions in the region. A company on whose board Hunter Biden sat received a large investment of Chinese capital shortly after the trip. According to the New York Times, Hunter has a 10% interest in BHR Partners, a private equity fund that the Chinese government-owned Bank of China has invested in. Of course, the Chinese government-owned Bank of China also rents a whole floor of Trump Tower, but never mind that. As of May 2019, both the New York Times and the Washington Post reported that Hunter had not received any money from the fund or in connection with his role as an unpaid advisory board member. In July of 2019, more than 2 years after his father left office, Hunter purchased an equity stake in the BHR fund, valued around $430,000, according to the Washington Post. There's no evidence that the former vice president received money from China. And last week, one of Hunter Biden's lawyers told the Washington Post that he hadn't received any return or compensation on account of this investment, or his position on the board of directors over at BHR. Hunter Biden's lawyer also said he did not conduct any business related to the investment fund during the 2013 trip, on which he was accompanied by one of his daughters. In a statement after Trump's comments on Thursday, Biden's deputy campaign manager, Kate Bedingfield, called his comments a grotesque choice of lies over truth and self over country. Biden's successor, however, made clear he saw nothing wrong with Trump's behavior. This is Pence, of course, saying the president made it very clear that he believes our other nations around the world believes our other nations. Yeah, interesting. Around the world should look into it as well, Vice President Mike Pence said during an appearance in Arizona, where he was working to sell a new North American trade deal, which also isn't happening. The simple fact is, when you hold the second highest office in the land, it comes with unique responsibilities, not just to be above impropriety, but to be above the appearance of impropriety, Pence said, as though he knew anything about that. Privately, Trump has been telling allies over the past week he believes Hunter Biden's activities in China to be potentially more damaging than the Ukraine. That's not the best one. The best one was China. Trump said at a private event in New York last week, remember that one, before or after going on a screed about the unfounded claims about the Bidens in Ukraine. That was the one at the UN mission, I think. Trump's insistence that Hunter Biden profited off his father's political position is not without irony, in case you hadn't thought about that. Beijing granted approval for fashion and accessory trademarks to Trump's daughter Ivanka last year, even after she shuttered her eponymous brand in July of 2018 because of slow sales. The president's attempt to build a relationship with Xi have proceeded in fits and starts since taking office. He was feted with a grand state visit during his first year in office, sipping tea with Xi inside the Forbidden City. He later reciprocated by hosting Xi, and this is not a reciprocation really, at Mar-a-Lago. Just can I repeat that? Trump went to China. They brought him to the Forbidden City. The Chinese president comes to the United States. They brought him to Mar-a-Lago. But he's not the only player in the impeachment saga with close ties to Xi. Biden was tasked during the Obama administration with courting the then vice president, Xi, during his apprenticeship for China's top job, The Apprentice, you see. They traveled together both in the U.S. and China. I've spent as much time with Xi Jinping as anybody has, Biden has boasted on the campaign trail, hoping to burnish his foreign policy credentials. That's an interesting note as well, and the note on which the CNN piece ends. But just wanted to give you that China angle as well. I do have the Wall Street Journal article that was earlier mentioned, I think, in Hunter's, our Hunter's, not Biden's, roundup of things, which may or may not still be available. They sometimes firewall these things after the initial release. Trump ordered Ukraine ambassador removed after complaints from Giuliani and others, and that gives a slightly different feel to things. And as time goes on, we're finding out more and more of this stuff is just coming down to straight-up orders from Trump, which is going to make the impeachment inquiry that much hotter. Let's see. Yes, two angles to give you on what's happening on the ground in Ukraine. We haven't, I don't know if we've mentioned, but if we have, it's only been in passing. Reports are that in addition to agreeing to say publicly the sorts of words that at least make it appear that President Zelensky has done what he needed to do in order to get Trump's attention, that is, announcing the reopening of these investigations, even if it's their intention to gloss it over and then close them again, just to get the weapons that they need or the meetings that they need to get the weapons. There is another problem looming out there, of course, and that is that Ukraine and Russia are at war over these eastern provinces of Ukraine, Crimea, which has just been outright annexed, and the Donbas region. And it is now reported that President Zelensky may, in fact, have made the call on Donbas. Ukraine may be laying down its arms and ceding the Donbas region to Russia and these pro-Russian separatists. And that itself is sparking all sorts of concern, as you might imagine, and protests in Kiev related to that. And of course, remember, he was just elected on this anti-corruption platform, and to see him immediately pressured by Trump on at least two fronts. One, election help, which itself is two-pronged. Investigate the Bidens and also look at the CrowdStrike thing as CrowdStrike / 2016. And wasn't it really Ukraine that meddled in the election and not Russia, so that Putin gets in the clear. But another goodie for Putin is in here, the surrender of Donbass. So I think people in Kiev who are protesting, it might be imagined that they are worried that their new anti-corruption president has been corrupted by our new corruption president, Donald Trump. So I saw yesterday on Twitter, thanks to Min, how do you pronounce this is I think the Vietnamese surname, NGO. No, or is it? I think that's basically the pronunciation, but I think I've heard that pronounced as no. Min No, who tweets here the apparent translation from the original, I guess, Ukrainian here. No surrender, along with a video of street protest in Ukraine. No surrender. Thousands of people have gathered in Kiev tonight to protest against President Zelensky's capitulation to Russia regarding Donbass. The Ukrainian president announced the concessions following a meeting with Trump. Well, I can't understand what the crowd is chanting because, of course, one, it's not that easy to hear, and two, it's in Ukrainian. But that's about, I guess, having seen that, I guess I would say, okay, I guess I would expect that, right? That's probably, I mean, I didn't think, I guess I would say I didn't expect Zelensky to, in fact, surrender the Donbass region, but that's because I know very little about Zelensky, or for that matter, the Donbass region. I just assumed, well, ordinarily people just don't surrender their territory. And if he was elected on a anti-corruption platform, and that's to be believed, then you would think that he would not do that. But what if he wasn't necessarily actually elected on that platform? Or what if he was kidding? What if he was corrupt all along? Or as some people in this thread following this tweet theorize, maybe his election was in fact arranged by Moscow just the same as Donald Trump's. Why would they arrange for the election of a pro-Ukraine independence, anti-corruption candidate? Because he's just kidding, or had already been corrupted, or look, that's what it takes to get elected in Ukraine, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we aren't going to later bend him over a barrel and force him to disavow all of this stuff, or else we'll kill him. So I guess there's that. So I just wanted to bring that up and then contrast it with the take of Mark Ames, who not a favorite of mine, and maybe not of a lot of you, and has his own perhaps checkered background, although a lot of it includes living in Russia. I don't know if he spent any time in Ukraine, but having lived in Russia, he might have some slightly more nuanced take on this to offer us, and the question is whether it's any good or whether he's someone to be believed. And this is interesting. So we see this other tweet, no surrender, and thousands of people out there waving Ukrainian flags. It goes, like I said, about as you would expect. No, we don't want to surrender the Donbass region. This is a huge blow against Ukrainian sovereignty and Ukrainian independence. But Mark Ames has similar photographs, and let me see, I'm just kind of looking through them. I don't see exactly what he's talking about here, but it's happening at night. And there is there's pictures with, or video with Min No's tweet here. Mark has just still photos, and Mark's description of what's going on in these photos, which look to be from the same assembly, is Ukraine's fascists in torchlit march against their Jewish president. Is Zelensky Jewish? I mean, it certainly could be. I don't know whether that's the case or not, accusing him of capitulation over peace moves. Which, I mean, peace moves? I would imagine that would be the Moscow take on things like, yeah, we'll have peace if you surrender. But on the other hand, I guess you could view it as ultra-left to think, well, peace at any cost is worth it. War just is so awful that it's to be avoided at all costs. And I guess an ultra-leftist might believe that people protesting, no, we'd rather stay in the fight and have more war, might be fascist. I, of course, can't see anything in the photos or understand anything in the Ukrainian text that gives rise to the surmise that these are Ukrainian fascists marching against their Jewish president and accusing him of capitulation. I think they're accusing him of capitulation, certainly, but not necessarily because he's Jewish. I don't know. Anyway, his next comment is, we really effed Ukraine up good. Not that anyone in the West gives a damn, and that's probably something I could easily agree to. But it does, it worries me a little bit, not just because it's Mark Ames, and I'm not sure how far to trust Mark Ames, probably not at all, but it does worry me because it brings up that weird tinge of anti-Semitism, which is not difficult to believe exists in large doses in Ukraine. Ukraine was the site of some of the most vicious anti-Semitic extermination activity during the Holocaust, and there must have been some historical basis for that. It wasn't just a whole lot more fun to kill Jewish people in Ukraine than it was elsewhere. There has to be something to it. And again, I mentioned some weeks back that I recall that there was some insinuation that Tymoshenko, when she was at the head of Ukraine's government, might likewise be tied up with some of these neo-fascist anti-Semitic forces emerging in Ukraine. But then we learned that that was likely part of a smear campaign against her. And now, I mean, I guess Mark Ames strikes me as the kind of person who might be willing to revive that smear, or may genuinely believe it to be true, and that the rest of us are blind, and his experience in Russia and the former Soviet Union gives him unique insight to see what we refuse to see. It's difficult to know. But I wanted to bring that contrast to your attention for your consideration over the weekend. And if there are any area experts out there who think that they can explain the two different views to me, I would certainly appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to move on here. What else is in Pocket that deserves morning attention? Something's going wrong with the way Washington Post pieces are being filed in Pocket. They all come up with displaying 404 page errors in Pocket, but if you click on them, they do bring you to the correct article. It just makes it impossible to know anything other than the fact that something sitting in Pocket is from the Washington Post. It doesn't tell you the headline anymore. Okay. This one, I guess, was... I think we'll skip this one. This one was about how this scandal could get much worse for Trump and Pence. But I think we're all kind of up to speed on how Pence is getting pulled into this situation. There's a piece that we can perhaps, I'll review during the break, that we might come back to, but I think we got a pretty good view of this possibility earlier in the week. This is a Josh Rogan piece. I'm still waiting for his report on the fabrication of this evidence. I don't know whether there's any mention of it in this piece here, but I'm still anxiously awaiting that. This is Kurt Volker again. Now, Kurt Volker was working on behalf of America's interests Unlike Rudy, his piece is titled, and this is from a couple of days ago, Tuesday, October 1st. But I think we got a taste of the possibility earlier in the week that Volcker really genuinely, though he's Republican and has a very different view of what America's foreign policy should all be about, very definitely thought that there was some possibility he might be able to salvage a genuine foreign policy out of the Trump mess. I guess Josh believes it. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I don't know whether the music came back during that break or not, but if not, those of you who are listening live were treated to a special secret message during the break in which I acknowledged that my mic was not muted, and we can move on. Let's see. There is, I think, some value to reading Josh Rogan's piece about Kurt Volker, just to clarify or add another perspective as we try and process over the weekend exactly who is Kurt Volker and what the hell was he trying to do in all this. But I may save it and have you just read that yourself over the weekend and refer you to it. There's another angle that I wanted to reiterate. I'm not positive that we explained it yesterday when talking to Greg. Greg mentioned correspondence between Senator Lindsey Graham and the Australian government. But there's a slightly different angle to this that I thought I should make you aware of. This is from the same set of tweets that Greg was reading from, Joe Hockey publishing Australia's response to Senator Graham, and NYC Southpaw adding the some other part of the correspondence here. But I guess Southpaw eventually comes back with Graham's initial letter, which we didn't have when we discussed it yesterday. There's the response from Australia saying, yeah, that guy, that diplomat that Papadopoulos spilled his guts to doesn't work for the Australian government anymore. But, we'll be whatever, I guess, looking into it, but we reject the whole idea that Australia was involved in manipulating the elections. Does Joe Hockey's letter that he had was, I guess, two different responses to Graham. I guess the thing I wanted to bring up, though, was Graham had written to Australia, according to Southpaw here, outlining the conspiracy theory the Trump administration has been pursuing, and this is the important information that I didn't know yet, was that their new spin on the conversation between Papadopoulos and, was it Downer? Alexander, maybe Downer from the Australian government, was that their additional spin here is, sure, Papadopoulos spilled his guts to Downer, but Graham seems to think, though he doesn't say who did it, he seems to think that Downer was directed to Papadopoulos, like, you should go try and get this information out of Papadopoulos or hang around him because he's a loudmouth drunk and he's likely to spill something about the Trump campaign. The insinuation, I guess, being that Australia's government was spying on the Trump campaign, which is an incredible spin and an incredible fabrication from all of what we have heard so far. Here's the highlighted part, appears down at the bottom of Graham's letter, and the highlighted part of this paragraph, and we'll just read the paragraph to give you the context. It appears that the United States law enforcement and intelligence communities relied on foreign intelligence as part of their efforts to investigate and monitor the 2016 presidential election, which, can I just say, I mean, that's a line that they've used for a long time. Can you imagine? I mean, I guess I don't need to turn you on to the idea of hypocrisy and chutzpah among Republicans, but they're saying that it's okay to take foreign government help. We all agree that it's actually illegal, and the FEC chairwoman keeps saying so and keeps saying that she can't believe she has to keep saying so, that yes, it's illegal to accept foreign help with an election. But what's angering Republicans is that our intelligence service had the audacity to rely on foreign intelligence services for information of any kind. But that's actually what intelligence services of allies, what intelligence services do among allies. They share intelligence when it's important, and they think that their allies will benefit from the information which will have no detrimental effect on their own national security. Foreign intelligence is meant to be shared with allies. But anyway, he's angry about that. It appears the United States law enforcement and intelligence communities relied on foreign intelligence as part of their efforts to investigate and monitor the 2016 presidential election. These efforts included, 1, relying on a deeply flawed dossier filled with hearsay and written by a biased former United Kingdom intelligence officer. And here again, he's relying... I had to mute the microphone there for just a second. He's relying on saturation in the wing nutosphere of the notion that there's something wrong with A, the dossier, even though it's been mostly confirmed, and B, that there's something wrong with hearsay because they know from American courtroom dramas that hearsay is a bad thing that you can't admit. But they don't, and most people don't know why hearsay is disfavored, but it's not necessarily unreliable information. And of course, in the intelligence gathering world, almost everything would be hearsay. That's the point of having human intelligence assets out there, to hear what other people say. Okay? So, I mean, duh. But, okay, relying on a deeply flawed dossier filled with hearsay and written by a biased former United Kingdom intelligence officer. Who writes intelligence dossiers? Intelligence officers. What do they fill it with? Things they hear people say. That's not even a complaint. But the efforts also included 2, receiving intelligence from an Italian, quote, professor. Now they're, quote, professoring Mifsud here, who was directed to contact a low-level Trump campaign advisor, George Papadopoulos, to gather intelligence on the campaign. And 3, accepting information from an Australian diplomat who was also directed to contact Papadopoulos and relay information obtained from Papadopoulos regarding the campaign to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. That's the highlighted part. That the Attorney General is holding meetings with your countries to aid in the Justice Department's investigation of what happened is well within the bounds of his normal activities. He's simply doing his job. I therefore write to urge you that you continue cooperating with the U.S. Attorney General as he continues his important investigation, blah, blah, blah. So this is a new angle on this. That the Australian diplomat who overheard the blabbermouth Papadopoulos was in fact sent there to do just that, because everybody knew that he would blab something. I mean, why did they hire the guy if that's what they knew about him? Whatever. But that doesn't enter into it. Now, essentially everybody who's been caught blabbing about digging for dirt on Hillary Clinton from the Russians, their excuse for it is, well, you only heard it because you planned to hear it, because you were sending spies to spy on the Trump campaign because reasons. No one knows, Southpaw points out, Graham never comes up with who it is that sent him, nor any real reason for the person to have been sent at all. And in commenting on this, Southpaw, I think, quite right in saying, does Graham know how crazy it is to write to a close U.S. ally on Senate letterhead and offhandedly tell them that their former foreign minister was directed by parties unknown to sabotage a U.S. presidential campaign? I guess that he does not. Okay, so I just thought I would bring that up so that you are aware of how far afield these stupid things are spinning. Let's see. Checking up on other information here. Yes, okay. Got it. All right. A dispatch of breaking news to me from Blakely Wall here, but I believe it is actually the CNN piece that we just read. So good, we're ahead of the game. That must mean we're doing a good job. Relative to the interests of people who are, I guess, not yet listening to the show. But it'll be very surprising as I bring this up. And when, I guess, Blakely, if you are a podcast listener, you will be pleasantly surprised. Or maybe you will think when I get to that CNN piece that was your doing. It would have been, but I got there first by accident instead. Thank you for sending that on. I appreciate it. And again, just a reminder, any of you who would like to influence the direction of the show, if you're dissatisfied with the way it's going now, you can send me a note via Twitter. That's the most likely way to get my attention, and see if we can't work that into our smart and fabulous discourse. Which reminds me as well, let's see, I managed to see this in passing yesterday. But as I understand it, was it art? Oh, I got to scroll back to make sure I can find the actual conversation so that I can. Yes, it was in fact our Twitter friend Arch Pundit, who actually, long time Netroots denizen Arch Pundit, but also now very active on Twitter, saying that he said yesterday, I promised people some dotard discussion on the show yesterday, and I appear to have let him down, and I don't think we mentioned the word dotard yesterday, and in fact, this comes from part of a discussion I happened to see fly by, and I think he was talking to Elise Hogue, who was saying, commenting on the fact that the North Koreans, I guess, have gotten antsy again and are sniping at Donald Trump over something. I guess they haven't been getting enough attention during the impeachment inquiry, and have brought back their greatest hit. I think the most brilliant thing they've ever said, using the word dotard in talking about Donald Trump. And I love it when they play the old stuff, as you know. But there were a couple people for whom it was actually new, which is amazing. And Elise, I guess, was saying, people don't use the word dotard enough, generally speaking, and not just for Donald Trump. And I did see Arch Pundit saying, that's because you don't listen to the Kagro in the Morning podcast. Otherwise, you would hear it every day. But don't promise anybody that I'll say dotard 15 times or whatever, or any minimum number of times on a show, because who knows what direction I'll be forced to take by the events of the day. But just to make up for it, dotard, dotard, dotard. Yes, we do use it all the time. And never forget it. I'm most appreciative to the North Korean communications officers who came up with that one. Sometimes it pays to learn stilted, archaic English overseas, because you can re-inject something worthwhile back into American English discourse. All right, let's see. Where did we need to get to with this? With so many of these Washington Post stories requiring an extra click to find out what they're about, it's difficult to see what. It doesn't work with everything, though. Let's see. Let me grab this one. This is an angle that we didn't discuss much, though I believe it was mentioned in some of the stories we read. This seems odd. Giuliani consulted with Ukraine on Ukraine with imprisoned Paul Manafort via a lawyer, which, I guess Rudy isn't. And so he spoke with another of the lawyers, Josh Dawsey, Tom Hamburger, Paul Son, Rosalind Helderman get the byline for the Washington Post on this story from the Second. In his quest to rewrite the history of the 2016 election, President Trump's personal attorney, that's Rudy Giuliani, Rudy Colludi, as we call him here, has turned to an unusual source of information: Trump's imprisoned former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. He does know something about Ukraine. Rudy, in recent months, has consulted several times with Manafort through the federal prisoner's lawyer in pursuit of information, maybe, about a disputed ledger that would bolster his theory that the real story of 2016 is not Russian interference to elect Trump, but Ukrainian efforts to support Hillary Clinton. Sure. Ukraine has traditionally been locked in geopolitical war with the United States, even as they attempt to westernize, join NATO, join the European Union. Obviously, the correct tack is to undermine our elections. The relationship, which Giuliani acknowledged in an interview this week with the Washington Post, stems from a shared interest in a narrative that undermines the rationale for the special counsel investigation. That inquiry led to Manafort's imprisonment on tax and financial fraud allegations related to his work in Kiev for the political party of former President Viktor Yanukovych. Giuliani's effort is gaining traction on Capitol Hill. Senator Charles Grassley, chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, and Senator Ron Johnson, chair of the Homeland Security Committee, have announced their renewal of an inquiry into any coordination between Ukraine and Democratic Party officials. Good job getting that story out. I mean, I'm glad it's gotten reported here so that we know about it, but I guess I wouldn't really call that traction necessarily. It's happening on Capitol Hill, and that's important to report, but most people don't know, despite the fact that it's here in the Washington Post. Manafort, who is serving a 7.5-year term in federal prison in Pennsylvania, has continued to express support for Trump, and Trump has never ruled out giving him a pardon. Trump's push on a July 25th call to get Zelensky to investigate the matter and also probe former Vice President Joe Biden triggered the impeachment inquiry, of course. Many of the accusations Giuliani has been making about Ukraine recycle those that Manafort's team first promulgated. Maybe that'll help us get to the bottom of where they originally came from. Giuliani joined Trump's team in April of 2018 to help defend the president against special counsel Robert Mueller's probe. And the former mayor said he launched his own investigation into Ukraine late last year, personally and on his own dime, I guess, which led him to consult with Manafort. He said he has not spoken directly to Manafort in 2 years. Not that it matters that it was direct or not. It was that I believed that there was a lot of evidence that the DNC and the Clinton campaign had a close connection to Ukrainian officials, Giuliani said, noting that he was never advocating for a pardon for Manafort. It was all about Trump. I don't think I could exonerate Manafort. Manafort's lawyer, Kevin Downing, did not respond to a request for comment. Giuliani said his consultation with Manafort centered on trying to ascertain the veracity of a secret black ledger obtained by Ukraine's National Anti-Corruption Bureau, which the New York Times revealed in an August 2016 story. The Times said the ledger recorded $12.7 million in cash payments from Yanukovych's political party to Manafort. The revelation led Manafort to resign from the campaign. Giuliani's narrative casts Ukrainian accusations in 2016 against Manafort, and efforts by Democratic operatives to gather research on Manafort after he took a leading role in Trump's campaign as a conspiracy involving both Ukrainian and American officials to swing the election for Clinton. As part of that, Giuliani has focused on a theory that Manafort's team was promoting as early as 2017, which is that the Ukrainian government separately interfered in the 2016 campaign on behalf of Clinton through the activities of a Ukrainian-American contract worker for the DNC, Alexandra Chalupa, which doesn't sound Ukrainian, but these things happen. Chalupa confirmed she worked part-time as an outreach worker for the DNC to Ukrainian Americans and others, and met with Ukrainian officials at the embassy in Washington during that time. She said she sounded the alarm on Manafort outside her duties for the DNC and sought to circulate that information because she said she was concerned about Manafort's ties to Yanukovych, who was backed by Russian President Putin. She said the Ukrainian embassy stayed clear of U.S. election matters, even with regard to Manafort. The White House has been pushing this narrative to distract from Donald Trump's gross abuse of power and pressuring a foreign country to interfere in our elections, said DNC Press Secretary Adrienne Watson. There were Ukrainian Americans and people in the Ukrainian anti-corruption movement who were motivated to shine a light on Manafort's activities in Ukraine during 2016, and some Ukrainian Americans were active on behalf of Clinton, said Jeffrey Mankoff, Deputy Director of the Russia and Eurasia Program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. But he said those activities aren't equivalent to Russia's state-sponsored intervention, which included the release of stolen emails and an extensive online disinformation campaign. One theory has been documented with extensive detail in the Mueller report, Mankoff said. The other is something that Rudy Giuliani and people in his orbit have conjured up as a way to cast aspersions and confuse the story. Giuliani said he needed to consult with Manafort through the latter's lawyer this spring to ask whether a black ledger ever existed. I said, was there really a black book? If there wasn't, I really needed to know. Please tell him I've got to know, Giuliani recalled asking Manafort's lawyer. He came back and said there wasn't a black book. What do you know? All the people in jail who aren't guilty say this. Giuliani said he was interested in the matter to prove his theory that the ledger's release, which he claimed was done in conjunction with U.S. officials, was part of a falsified pretext for U.S. authorities to reopen a case against Manafort. The FBI, however, already had a case open against Manafort before the 2016 campaign, for no apparent reason, having interviewed him twice about his work with Ukraine in 2013 and 14. The special counsel's office did not introduce the Black Ledger at Manafort's trial in Virginia. Oh my God, it's hearsay? Oh my God. It's hearsay that there's a theory about the Black Ledger. You got to stop talking about it now, Rudy. They didn't introduce it at the trial, nor did Manafort's defense team mention the document during his trial on tax and fraud, financial fraud charges, or try to show that it had been forged. So, they had the opportunity to do that and didn't. Why? Because it's not true. After a jury convicted Manafort of 8 felonies, the former Trump campaign chairman pleaded guilty in Washington to avoid a second trial. As part of his plea, Manafort acknowledged that he made more than $60 million in Ukraine. Now that's 100 times what Biden made in Ukraine. I guess if you're interested in totaling it up, he made $600,000 a year, although he did do it over a course of 6 years, which I don't know whether he was paid for a full year in his first and second years there. I guess not, because we're not all the way through 2019. So that'd be possibly in the neighborhood of $3 million over 6 years or so. Manafort, not no slouch there, $60 million. It says also laundering more than $30 million of it through foreign companies and bank accounts to hide from the IRS, and cheating the government out of about $15 million in taxes. He also agreed that he had lobbied in the United States on behalf of Ukrainian officials without registering, and that he conspired to tamper with witnesses in his case. Sergei Lyshenko, the Ukrainian journalist, anti-corruption campaigner, and former member of parliament, said the ledger was obtained by an anonymous source in the burned-out ruins of the headquarters of Yanukovych's party, which I hope one day we'll replicate here in the United States and have a burned-out remains of the Republican Party after after our own revolution and de-Bathification of the United States. We can burn down their party headquarters. His involvement in the release of part of the Black Ledger's contents at a news conference, he said, was motivated by a desire that Manafort be brought to justice for his activities in Ukraine. Giuliani's entire approach is built on disinformation and the manipulation of facts, Lyshenko said in an op-ed in the Post. Giuliani has developed a conspiracy theory in which he depicts my revelations about Manafort as an intervention in the 2016 U.S. election in favor of the Democratic Party. That's their favorite new theory, I guess. In a text conversation, it's a hot topic right now, with Manafort from August 2017, released by prosecutors, Fox News host Sean Hannity mentions Ukraine interference as one of the issues he was highlighting to attack Mueller. In his show that year, Hannity repeatedly claimed Ukraine had intervened in the 2016 election by sharing information on Manafort with a DNC contractor. Manafort did not respond directly to those claims, but frequently encouraged and praised Hannity throughout the summer. The White House also promoted the allegation. If you're looking for an example of a campaign coordinating with a foreign country or a foreign source, look no further than the DNC, who actually coordinated opposition research with the Ukrainian embassy. White House spokeswoman Sarah Sanders lied in July of 2017. Grassley and Johnson, writing this week in a letter to Attorney General Barr, again mentioned the allegations as a matter they intend to investigate. And I guess here's an excerpt from the letter. And really, honestly, who cares what that says? Just the fact that they're doing it is all you need to know. And something to keep in mind as we head into what is undoubtedly an explosive weekend to come. Okay. I have another piece here. I'm just wondering if this is the same thing. No, this is the explanation. This is Greg Sargent's explanation of the other fake theory that they have that they thought were going to save them, which is already fading from the news cycle, that Adam Schiff had some sort of advance warning that has since transmuted somehow into Adam Schiff wrote the whistleblower complaint. That, of course, having been debunked the last day or two. And, I think that should probably keep things under wraps for that. That'll probably be the end of that theory's infiltration into mainstream coverage. Okay, let's see. Anything else scrolling even further down? Let's see. Oh, yeah, right. Oh, well, here's some confirmation from the other day that was just tweeted around, but then was linking to more Ukrainian language news reporting. But on October 1st, which was Tuesday, I had this tweet, which does in fact claim Zelensky at urgent meeting confirms that Ukraine has agreed to implement Steinmeier formula. And what is that? That is essentially, as I understand it, that is the plan for so-called peace, which is contingent on the surrender of the Donbas region to Russia, although you're just not hearing a great deal about it in the American press, but I'm wondering whether that will happen over the weekend as well, whether we're going to catch up with that. So I'm still waiting for American-sourced confirmation of both the plan to do so and of the protests in Kiev and the provenance of those protests as well. We still have to figure out exactly who it is who's leading those protests, and it could, of course, be multiple sources. And one of those sources could, in fact, be proto- or neo-fascist in their orientation. It's difficult to tell if you're not on the ground and don't speak Ukrainian. All right, let's see. I guess one other thing that could be of some interest over the weekend, but which we won't have time to actually get to, I did happen to see earlier in the week CNBC's report, slightly off topic, but perhaps something of some interest for a background review. FBI releases files on President Trump's late lawyer, Roy Cohn. And it's probably always of interest to get the FBI file on Roy Cohn, but the fact that he is, in fact, linked with Donald Trump only makes it more interesting. The sort of thing that you might want to look into over the weekend. It comes from back on September 27th in CNBC. Dan Mangan making this report. Well, we got enough time maybe for the key points that expressed as bullet points up at the top. The FBI released nearly 750 pages of documents from the Bureau's file on Roy Cohn, whose clients included President Trump when Trump was a fledgling real estate mogul in New York City. "Where's my Roy Cohn?" Trump has been quoted lamenting when he was faced with political and legal pressures. Cohn was at least the first of two personal lawyers for Trump to be disbarred. The second was Trump's more recent attorney and fixer, Michael Cohen, who couldn't fix that, who gave porn star Stormy Daniels hush money to keep her quiet about an alleged sexual tryst with Trump. So maybe over the weekend you'll want to mine that and find out whether there was any juicy details released and all of that. In the meantime, there are juicy details to be had from Justice Putnam from the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, which comes up next right here on Netroots Radio. What's he got for you? Well, let's see. Well, we've got a terrified Trump who is predicted to get way worse. That's easy enough to predict. And then the Trump tax whistleblower comes back into the news with an update that Justice will bring you
From
next.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
What else is on the menu? North Carolina GOP played the sore loser after a court struck down its gerrymandering scheme. Italian Prime Minister Conte said he is not concerned that William Barr held secret meetings with Italian intelligence agencies. And what else here? Mexican Supreme Court Justice resigning amid corruption allegations. My, all next.